Good evening, this is the Oscar Expert here with Brother Bro, and it's time to review Origin, directed by Ava DuVernay.
This is an adaptation of the nonfiction book Caste. It argues that racism is not the best way to understand the relations between different groups of people when it comes to groups that subjugate other groups. And Ava DuVernay adapts this book by making the subject of the film the author, played by Anjanou Ellis, who's on a journalistic mission to complete this thesis. And the style of this film is very meditative, a little bit free-flowing. The film looks at international contexts such as Nazi Germany and India's caste system to contextualize America's racism. And we're taking on a journey here that expands many geographical locations as well as time periods.
It's almost more like a documentary or an essay film in the way that it wants to tell you a message. And to some extent, I kind of admire that the movie's just going for telling you something, and the fact that Ava DuVernay is making a narrative film that feels very unlike other narrative films. I personally came away from this movie thinking that it would have been better served as a documentary, because I was genuinely interested in what the movie was trying to present to me, and some of the arguments that it made were interesting, but I didn't think that the way that it fed me these arguments, or filtering it through this story about the author discovering the arguments for herself, I didn't think that that helped me to understand anything. And I think Ava DuVernay was attracted to this because she wanted to bring something human and emotional to this. The author is going through a lot of hard things in her personal life, but I really didn't find many threads between the author's personal life and the theories that she is developing. I almost wanted the movie to just tell me the theories.
She wants to bring to life the ideas from this book in a cinematic way and make you feel them viscerally, and there's a lot of effort put into creating beautiful images here. The film photography gives it a sense of timelessness, though sometimes I feel like the cinematography is beautiful for just the sake of being beautiful, and which is fine. But I have to compare this to 13th and ask, was this just as effective as that approach? Because they're similar films. They both have a thesis that they're trying to tackle. It's not something that's going to be intuitive for a lot of people, so it has to walk you through step by step. And I rewatched 13th recently, and it does this really effectively. And I also listened to a good portion of Caste before I watched this film, so I understand how the book flows, and I found the source material to be very convincing and compelling. I would highly recommend the source material, but I can't help but think, had I discovered the film first, the ideas just simply would not resonate as deeply for me. It may have been better served in the same format as 13th, and just stuck to feeding you ideas. I was surprised in the first half that I didn't feel like it was explaining too much to me, and it felt very much like it stood on its own as a narrative film. And then as it went on, I think it inevitably dove deeper into just being didactic and making sure you get the points. Again, I think the source material is such that it just has to be explained, and the film does resort to that, and it does begin to feel a little bit less like you're watching a narrative film.
I listened to a very small portion of the audiobook, and I honestly felt like the very small portion I listened to was more interesting than any point made in the movie, unfortunately. I actually didn't even feel like it tied together all of the ideas that it promises in the beginning. I don't think it was detailed enough. It just felt like a broad summary.
But it's really the details that make it interesting and make it worth the hundreds of pages where the author expounds on the theory and why it's useful, why it matters. Clearly, there was a big interest in what the author was going through personally in her life, and I don't really get how this informed her journey creating her thesis. I think it tries to tie something together there. You know how the book's dedicated to her family members? Well, it presents her family members and shows what they meant to her. But I don't buy the connection of that driving her towards the thesis. Like, yes, it motivated her to become the best version of herself, but it's sort of separate from how she discovered the thesis, which is just, she just did the work.
I also just think it's a weird format for a movie to be about someone forming a theory. It's like a school science thing where there's a little science guy who takes you back in time to learn about Einstein, and then you come back to the present and he has an interaction with his mailman that demonstrates physics or something, and then you go back to it. It's almost like that, but attempting it in a prestige way, and it just felt weird to me.
I also think people are going to find this to be melodramatic, because it kind of is. The conflicts that happen to the author are very melodramatic, played up by strings, and they're edited to really have an impact on you. And I hate to say it, but it did feel a little bit like it's just trying to go for making you feel something without really there being something deeper to it.
I didn't like the score that much. It was
a little on the nose.
It wasn't like creatively done. It was just kind of like the type of weepy strings that you would expect.
Right. That being said, I did find this to be a very well-made movie. Some of the dramatic scenes actually worked for me. When Anjanou Ellis is trying to explain her theory commentary to her friends. I think the performances are well done, and I like the cinematography and how those conversations are shot. I think the whole ensemble here is really good. And so there are pieces when I think that was well done. I liked seeing that. And there was a lot of this film that I was invested in and I was really into, and I was buying it as a drama for a lot of it. I think it slipped away for me at the end. It's a noble and ambitious effort. If anything, this is a worthy project to point more people towards the source material.
If I didn't know any of the source material, this movie wouldn't have convinced me to go towards it, because I would have thought, well, that's not that crazy of an idea. Like, that's kind of easy for me to digest.
People are going to have a wide range of experiences. The Letterboxd score reflects this. But I think I've got to go with like a 6 out of 10 here.
I'll go with like just barely a 5 out of 10. Some people think that this is an awards contender. Specifically, the people who really liked it, I just cannot see it based on my viewing and based on just how divisive it is in general. It also just is very unconventional as a film. So I'd be surprised if this got into any of the categories that people who think it has a shot think it could get into, which is pretty much just picture, director, adapted screenplay, and actress. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing.
Should they make more nonfiction adaptations where the author becomes the protagonist?